Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. The 2020 election cycle has kicked off. We were going to bring you Governor Nixon. We're going to bring him next week. He was a little under the weather this week. So we have an opinion maker panel. Representative Wiley, Price City of St. Louis, thanks for joining us, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Friend of the show, Tracy McCreery, welcome back.
Thank you.
Senator Jim Lemke, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
And Jason Fulbright, Jefferson County, correct?
Yes, sir.
County committee man.
Yes, Secretary of the Republican Party.
Used to be the swing county of the state. I'm not sure it is anymore, right?
I think we're pretty much a red county in the state.
Well, let's talk about some blue politics. Wiley Price, the Democratic presidential nomination. This is on Sunday, so South Carolina's happened. You know, it looks like former Vice President Biden will do well. I think there's got to be some people that in the state that are mirroring some of the national folks that are freaking out a little bit about a Bernie Sanders nomination. He still looks like he's the favorite to win, right?
Yeah, he does definitely look like he's the favorite to win. I am pro-Bernie to a point. I don't want to go on record and endorse anybody at this point. Sure. But yeah, I think everybody has flaws this year, and I think that highlights a greater issue, a more inherent issue within the Democratic Party, is that we haven't been doing a good job of creating a bench. We haven't been grooming guys up. We have the same guys for the last decade for the most part, and I think that to me is the more overarching issue.
Is it the issue though that maybe the real activists, the people on the ground in your party, they are with Bernie? There's a socialist message that appeals to them.
Yeah, I think so. I think that also there's a two-piece part to that. Those are the liberals in the party, and the conservatives will be with Biden. And I would argue that it's not really the conservatives that are with Biden. Those are the people that feel like that's a safe vote, and it's not going to create the trickle-down effect that a Bernie Sanders would within the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I remember when Donald Trump was running, there was, 20 Republicans that ran. They had to have two different debates. I felt like Hillary Clinton was the favorite. I think any data would have shown that. I thought that when Republicans voted for Trump, they weren't really missing out on a lot because, honestly, I don't know that Ted Cruz could have beaten Hillary Clinton. I don't think many people that voted for Trump really thought he was the favorite to beat her. So it wasn't a throwaway vote. I do think if you're a Joe Biden, you start off the significant favorite to beat Donald Trump. It's not a throwaway vote.
No, I agree, but the dynamics, are setting themselves up, and it looks like it's going to be Bernie Sanders. And I guess the question is, how does that affect Missouri politics? And of course, that's what many of us sitting here today are really interested in is Missouri politics. I think that with Sanders at the top of the ticket, seats that particularly in the Missouri Senate that I focus on might have been in danger. Now all of a sudden,
start moving. Andrew St. Louis, Caleb Browden, County.
Exactly. So I think that we're looking at keeping our numbers in the supermajorities or growing our numbers in the supermajorities.
In Jefferson County, that to me is a place where Donald Trump, it won't be just that Sanders is weak. Donald Trump is that strong in Jefferson County. Does this change the number? Was it Jefferson County be 70-30 for Trump maybe?
Oh, I think absolutely. I think the Donald Trump is stronger in Jefferson County this year than he was 4 years ago. And I think everybody in Jefferson County, I mean, you talk about down ticket and at the county level even. Yeah. I think everybody would love to see Sanders at the top of the ticket because they'll just put comrade blank as to whoever they're running against, and it's off to the races.
Tracy McCreery, it is an interesting thing. There's a dynamic. If you're Nicole Galloway, you're mounting a serious campaign. You're traveling to all sorts of parts of the state. You're raising a good amount of money. You're the underdog in Missouri, no question. But is it even a competitive race if you're sided with Bernie Sanders?
Well, I think Auditor Galloway's doing the right thing right now, which is she's just focusing on her campaign because some of these things are just outside of our control. Right now, what I see with the Democratic primary options is it reminds me of that big box of crayons with all the different, colors and
They're picking the red one right now.
Well, good one. So, but anyway, I think that the question that Democratic primary voters are faced with is, one option is who do we think can beat President Trump? The other question is,
that hatred for Trump would have manifested itself in picking the person you would have beat him.
No, I think, there's that question, but then the other question is who do we think could be the best president? And those sometimes are not the same person. And I think that's what a lot of Democrats are struggling with. I myself need to vote early because I'll be in Jeff City on March 10th, and I still haven't voted for the simple reason that I can't decide. I can't reconcile those two questions.
Agreed. So in Missouri, Jason, You're a fellow Jefferson County and came out this week. Jay Nixon was going to be on our show to talk about it. Bring him on next week. Endorsed Mike Bloomberg. Now, there's a thing about Jay Nixon. I know Senator Lemke's fought with him and worked with him, and different people have had, people in Jefferson City have different views on Jay Nixon. But I'll tell you this, they keep records of who wins elections.
Sure.
More Missourians have voted for Jay Nixon more often than any other person in history, from Thomas Hart Benton all the way to Kit Bond to Roy Blunt. Nixon knows how to get votes. And he told me something when I interviewed him one time. He talked about work. And he talked about how when Democrats value work, that they do well. When they value giving things away for free, they don't. Now, there's a safety net, but I'm not sure he's not a wise person in stepping out now for Bloomberg. If it is a Sanders, you really can't make the valuing work argument that Jay Nixon won this state with so many times.
Absolutely. I think the other key thing that comes into the Sanders on the top of the ticket is I wonder how many of the Bernie bros and how many of the Bernie supporters just don't come out. And I think that's where you could have a huge loss again, is that if it's not someone who's more conservative or more moderate on the top of the ticket, then I think you do have a risk of a lot of people staying home and just not voting, which, again, just adds to the Trump numbers.
Is that what happens, do you think? Is that there's some Democrats that just don't vote? They're just demoralized. They think there's no chance they'll win, so they just stay home, and it does affect some of those Senate races.
Well, yeah, and I think that they're in a box. Okay, so if it's Bernie Sanders, maybe you have some more moderate Democrats that don't come out, and if it is a Bloomberg, maybe the Bernie people stay home. I mean, it's a quandary.
You mentioned there's seats that you think will be tough to defend that won't be as tough if that's the case. Are there some seats like a Senator Rizzo and a Senator Arthur, seats that probably you were the underdog in, that now those look very competitive if that's the person at the top of the ticket?
Well, I think the difficulty is if we had found a candidate to run against those senators, they most likely would have announced by now. And to get top-tier candidates, to run against incumbents is not an easy chore. So I think our focus is going to be defend, our incumbents, and then look at these open seats and make sure, from my vantage point, that we're electing good conservatives to the Senate.
There's a congressional seat that you know a lot about, that Senator Jill Shoup's running against Congresswoman Ann Wagner. How does this affect that? I mean, I view Donald Trump as somebody that will be a headwind for Ann Wagner and probably will be helpful to Jill Shoup. But if it's Bernie Sanders, how does that dynamic affect that?
Well, the thing about Senator Jill Shoup is she is so well known and beloved in the community, it won't matter who's at the top of the ticket. Senator Shoup served on the Ladue School Board for years. She was a Creve Coeur City councilwoman for years.
It includes Arnold, it includes some St. Charles County, it goes all the way down to Fenton, Kirkwood.
Her record speaks for itself, and I think people truly will support Jill no matter who's at the top of the ticket.
I have a high regard for Senator Shoup, but I have seen in Missouri, there used to be, we had a track record of the show me state, right? You'd vote for a Republican for governor and a Democrat for attorney general and back and forth. I've seen, really since 2010, that's not the case anymore. For both parties, we start off as a Republican +5 state, and the national mood kind of takes us. I've seen a lot less of that. I respect that person I'm voting for them regardless of my party stream I'm voting for.
No, it's becoming kind of a groupthink, but I will say that the policy that the people have been picking have been Democratic policy, but the people that they're asking to represent them have been Republican. And the examples are blaring in medical marijuana, clean Missouri. These are just examples of very Democratic policy. But I think that Missouri is a true swing state in that every 25 years we go back and forth, and we're coming up on that 20th, 25th year of the Republicans. And I think that I think that this is a tipping point, in my opinion.
Let me ask you a question about that, though. You talk about, I agree with you. However, when the Democrats had these large majorities, they were pro-life, pro-gun Democrats holding these seats. The social issues that I think appeal to a lot of Missourians in swing areas of the state, I don't know that you can really have that swing come back unless Missourians change their views on those social issues. And I haven't seen that happen going back 100 years.
Again, it goes back to what I was saying. I think that we are creating a groupthink, but I think that is a national thing.
I agree.
And it's coming down to the local level, and I think that's just, it's happening everywhere.
It's unfortunate to say, I think.
It is.
Senator Lemke, when you're talking about a Republican campaign, you start off with guns and abortion, right?
Right.
And you go from there. I don't know that when you're Danny Staples or you were, even people that represented South County, St. Louis, Jefferson County, Bill McKenna, you accuse him of being anti-abortion, he probably would say yes. You accuse him of being pro-gun, he would say, of course I am. I don't know that those core things changed. I think maybe the national party's views on him changed, and those seats are now held by Republicans.
Well, and what you have to realize that in Missouri, when you do take guns and babies and set them aside, there's not much difference between Democrats and Republicans.
That's true.
In Missouri. Okay, what happens is Republicans campaign one way and then govern another. And the way they govern is pretty close to where most of the Democrats are, unless they're far left.
Right.
You know,
I don't
so
disagree with that.
yeah, I mean, so really, when you get down into the weeds, the dynamics of where somebody is politically on the spectrum really has to do with the group that I'm involved with, the conservative Republicans. They're fighting with leadership more than the Democrats are.
That is true.
And while I have you here, I want to talk to you about that. Let's talk about some of these Senate primaries. Let's go down to Cape County. I think everybody thinks that's going to be the biggest, hottest, most probably personal one. You guys are on the side of Representative Holly Rader against Kathy Swan.
Right.
I'll ask you the question. Can a person that's not from Cape County win that Senate seat?
The norm would be no, but here's the thing. You have this great contrast between the two candidates that are running. So Kathy Swan has a record that, you know, when, and then Holly will have the resources.
So you have the resources on the record. Let's move down the boot hill. Interesting race. You have three folks. I've always felt like that's hillbillies versus flatlanders. Now Jason Bean's in. He's a flatlander. He's the only one. Trump has changed it. Before the hillbillies, we always won that seat because we all voted in the Republican primary. Flatlanders voted Democrat. After Trump, everybody votes in the Republican primary. That's going to be an interesting seat where you have a lot of the Butler County folks could split that vote up, and a flatlander probably has an advantage now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, especially now that it's a three-way race.
Yeah.
Two of the three have made a commitment to join the conservative caucus, so you know, we're kind of staying out of that one.
Sure. Then Senator Cunningham's replacement, Robert Ross, is running against Carl Esslinger and Van Kelly, former legislator. That's an interesting one. That's a lot of like, where are you from? Where's your kinfolks from type race.
Well, I like our chances whenever there's a three-way race and we've got the most conservative candidate in a Republican primary.
So talking about Mike Moon, David Cole, interesting race. It'll tell you a lot about what kind of Republicans those are. Very outspoken person, Mike Moon. David Cole, maybe more David Sater, traditional type candidate.
Yeah, Mike Moon is an interesting character. You know, he takes his stands based on the Constitution. And he votes against a lot of Republican things, which is kind of interesting.
You always find a reason to vote no, right?
Right, and David Cole is pretty much an establishment guy. So we're with Mike Moon. You know, people call him crazy, but he'll be our crazy.
That's why I love him when he's on.
He's principled.
Yeah,
that's why I love you beyond.
He's a good man. I love him. Yeah.
I agree, but I think that's maybe other people's thought.
What I can say about Mike Moon, what I appreciate him, especially within our body, he's consistent. And the problem that I have within our body is that our moral compass goes left and right depending on what the bill is.
I like how a lot of Republicans, they want to restrain every piece of government except the one they happen to got elected to. They want that one to
my
be
point,
huge. Yeah.
exactly.
All right, we'll save the Bund and Bratton for one time when you come back here. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about some legislative issues, tort reform, whatever, after we come back. But first, I want you to go to showingmissouri.com, the history of Sheridan County, Sterling Price's hometown, rising star on the Republican Party is on our side. On the show. Evan Emmerich was on, presiding commissioner, great guy, interesting county. Showingmissouri.com, the history of Missouri, one county at a time. We'll be right back after this.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association.
Mike Parson served in law enforcement for 22 years. A former sheriff, Parson is tough on crime. Governor Parson is standing up for victims, investing in better mental health services, and cracking down on violent crime and drugs. Governor Parson's anti-crime initiatives have led to the arrests of hundreds of violent criminals and gang members. A former sheriff, a conservative, tough on crime governor. Mike Parson is making Missouri families safer.
your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren, Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work.
Welcome back this week in Missouri Politics. We're going to talk about what happened in the legislature this week. Tort reform happened for about 20 hours on the floor. Former Senator Lemke and a person that's been on this show that are well known to our viewers and that is very close to you, Senator Bill Eigel. It was his bill. I like when Bill Eigel has a bill because sometimes you see a senator come on, talk about his bill for a few minutes and leave. Bill Eigel will come back every 4 or 5 hours and discuss his bill. I like that. I think that's quality senating. His bill didn't pass. However, I think his bill opened the floodgates to some other bills passing on tort reform.
It was a great surprise. First of all, let me set the table. Senator Eigel had his asbestos bill on the floor, and it was making common sense reforms to the tort law in this area where both sides would benefit from those changes. And quite frankly, because of emotion, the Democrats, led by Senator Walsh, decided this was the one that they were going to,
but to her credit,
the hill to die on.
Against this her whole career.
Exactly. So that's the way it works in the Senate. So after 15 hours of, filibuster, lo and behold, what happened behind the scenes was that Senator Walsh and the Democrats were negotiating with the leadership of the Senate and actually throwing the rest of the tort agenda under the bus for the sake of asbestos. So what was passed was probably the most lopsided deal I've ever seen in my history in the Senate.
A play with Patrick Mahomes that they designed the play to be like a left hook, but the play's broken, and then it ends up with a heck of a gain for the Chiefs, right? I mean, it looked like a broken play that ended up, I think Senator Eigel looked very good by the time, maybe not because nobody had slept, but after people took a nap that morning, come back that afternoon and had something to eat, thought, well, good night for Senator Eigel.
Well, yeah, and frankly, Senator Eigel wanted to pass his asbestos bill. He'd worked very hard on it. He worked with both sides, to bring them together and get it done. And it was going to be an uphill battle. But for a 9-month delay, pretty much the rest of the tort agenda was accomplished with not 15 minutes worth of debate.
This comes back to this goes over to the House now. I do think Senator Walsh has been passionately against this. She knows more about asbestos than anybody else there. She has steadfastly opposed this, and I do think most folks, we're in the peanut gallery where I was sitting, people thought, well, you're not going to get this past Senator Walsh. Right. And there's some folks that said maybe you should do a compromise this year while she's here. She went a different route. I do think that is a very big tort reform package heading over to the House.
Well, I think it's important, and the Senate Dems stood up on principle. I would never say that Senator Walsh makes decisions on emotion either. I mean, she is a true leader.
But is passionate. She knows people that have had mesothelioma. I mean, her personal friends of ours that she worked with. Exactly. It would be hard not to have some feeling. I've met a couple people in the union, the insulators union, that have had this disease. And it is heartbreaking to watch them suffer.
Well, I think the Senate Dems bravely stood up against big corporations and really did what they could do to protect people dying from asbestos exposure from having things taken away from them. And
it is true. I mean, I know that Senator Eigel's argument where this benefits people with claims. Well, most of the people with claims, like firefighters were mentioned, well, they don't think it benefits them.
I think that this, and just to go back on what you were saying earlier about the how we govern similarly, I think that this is where we most often govern differently, when it's corporation over the people. This is a glaring example of that, in my opinion.
On the ground, this is one of the issues. I mean, every Republican I know talks about guns and abortion. Then they might throw tax cuts in there, depending on where they're from. Tort reform is an issue that really does, on the grassroots level, you pretty much do divide up Republican, Democrat.
Yeah, it's very often something that does split down party lines.
And it's hard to understand.
It absolutely is. But I think that you have to give the House and the Senate kudos for taking up these issues, because it is one of those things that I think is vital that Missouri has to have some reform. Being at a local level, we see lawsuits, everybody wants to sue for everything. And it does come down to the fact that it's just a money-making machine out there. And unless there's something that's done to try and amend this system so that there are some caps or something, it has to be done. One of the things that I think is very interesting is on the Democratic side of the issue, you do talk about this as like a workers' right issue. This is workers' right. But I always think in my mind as well, the guy that's working on the assembly line down at the 3M plant is not the guy that caused this problem. It's the executives in the past. And again, you get into the whole litigation of what was known when and how far did the company go. But I think that tort reform helps the workers because it's going after companies that the people that are working there now maybe aren't the people that made those decisions.
If you don't think that the corporations and the insurance companies and the tort reform crowd is not dancing a jig on what happened in the Missouri Senate this last week, you're sadly mistaken.
Well, I think the night started, I was in Sedalia at a meeting about the state fair, and I thought this would be a normal thing where you put it on the floor in the afternoon, it goes till midnight or 2, and then you lay this over till next year, and I think that may be where that asbestos discussion goes. But as the night went on, you saw this much bigger deal coming together. I would say that probably a very good night for Senator Eigel.
Yes.
Let's talk about something in the House. It was very almost a typical legislative week, right? You had huge, complicated issues in the Senate, and you had social issues in the House. So there's a bill to ban marriage. Explain from your perspective what this is.
Well, basically, the General Laws Committee in the House on Wednesday night passed a bill out of committee that would roll back marriage equality. And it's in response to the Supreme Court saying that there would be marriage equality. So if this bill were to pass, what would happen is everybody who's currently married, their marriage would revert back to a domestic union. And so all of us that are married, myself, we would have these domestic unions, and then select people that either have the ability to get married in a church, they would be able to say that they're married. So basically what this bill would do is create a 2-tier system of partnerships, basically. And it's a huge problem.
Well, I mean, I understand there's federal implications, but if you just treat everyone the same, shouldn't you just let Facebook keep track of who's married and the government just build roads and schools and things?
I mean, why do we care? Why do we care?
And why should you pay people from the government to keep track of personal decisions?
I strongly agree. I am for small government, sometimes more than the people on the other side of the aisle are.
I'm an ACLU member myself. I might be the only ACLU Farm Bureau member in the state. I don't want the government involved in what I do.
That part.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
I'm with you on that, but the critical thing to keep in mind is there are over 1,000 benefits from the federal government, including things with taxation and surviving spouse benefits, that only come to couples that are married. So if Missouri passes a law, we are jeopardizing people's ability to, like, if they're a military spouse, they would not be able to get those benefits if they were only.
Run for Congress and change that.
And
well,
what if you move? What if you move to Florida and that they don't honor civil unions?
I respect the pragmatic part of it, but at the end of the day, in a situation, I worked in the legislature at the time. I believe this was a turnout thing that was done back in the day to ban gay marriage. There's an age limit sometimes of where you are on these things. I know there's a lot of people that are truly religious that believe that having a marriage of 2 people of the same sex is wrong. Now, whatever you think of their opinion, that's not bluster. I also think that these are matters that you shouldn't pay taxes, whether you agree with that or not, for that. Let God sort them out.
Treat everybody the same. That's what our Constitution says. Sure. But I get this because pretty much anything that the government gets involved in, they mess up. Okay, so this was an institution established by God, and it was the first institution that He established. So I get why people are passionate about it. Okay,
I admire Mike
and
Parson. I don't
I'd
think
say
he's
the
gonna prove
idea
on
of
God.
government not being involved in marriage, if we can figure out the federal level thing, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, you conservative or you not?
Well, I consider myself a conservative and a Christian, but the thing I have is that I really wish we could focus on things like roads, bridges, education, some of these other issues that are very hot and topics and very important to
Maybe if you
people.
took county recorders and took all the time they spend with marriage deeds and put them on helping MoDOT clear easements, you could build roads.
Possibly. I think, though, that the one thing that you're definitely seeing across the board on both sides of the aisle is that the younger generations, the up and coming, these are not their issues. The issues that we're looking at from the side of laws and things like that. They don't care. They think everybody, you just need to calm down.
People are people.
Last time, we've talked about this on the show before, voter ID's coming back. I think people thought, well, we passed that, and the court said you can't do that. Now, voter ID's up again. Walk me through. If you're just a regular person watching this show, that maybe it's a passive observer of politics, you have to have a license to do all sorts of things. Why not to vote?
Because it's unconstitutional.
Okay.
Simply put.
There you go.
1966.
So what is the argument for this bill that's going to get around that?
Well, it'll go, the bill that we're putting together on the House floor right now will go back to the court and it will be found unconstitutional again. So voting is such a fundamental right. It's not like being able to rent a movie or, to do other things that you need a driver's license or a photo ID for. It's a fundamental right, and there are tens of thousands of Missourians that do not have a photo ID. So by making people jump through hoops, you're basically making it harder for them to vote.
Either you want to invite people to the democracy and have every constituent be a part of the democracy, or are you going to create obstacles for them to not be involved?
Do we have, 30% of those eligible voting in elections, because some are concerned about the integrity of the vote? I mean, I think it's very important.
The boogeyman?
It's not a boogeyman.
Voter
fraud has been documented over and over and over again.
Where?
We know it happens. There's
But not
no
the kind of voter fraud that having a photo ID would fix. So,
Exactly.
and that's what we have to stay
The
focused on.
boogeyman is
think
the
it
idea
is.
that Russia is involved in
I
our
agree with
elections.
that.
That's the boogeyman.
Okay.
But do you really also think that is that big of a hindrance to people to have to show an ID for so many things in life, to not have to show them when you vote?
You have to be compassionate and walk a mile in other people's shoes. Some people's lives are so challenging that being able to find their birth certificate from the southern state they were born in 70 years ago is a hoop that they cannot jump through. So we need to show
That's why I
compassion.
enjoy you being on the show, but
we
the
already-
show's coming to an end, so I need, with a minute left to on the week.
I'm sad. When the week Battlehawks, I'm just,
Exactly.
I'm excited to be able to get up on the weekends and have something to look forward to. And it looks like we got a pretty good team, and St. Louis is eating it up, so I'm a fan of.
Who won the week?
The Senate Democrats for helping protect asbestos victims from additional harm.
Who won the week?
I'm going to say Senator Bill Eigel. Filing opened this week, and he got 2 Democrat opponents, one in the Republican primary and one in the general.
Who won the week?
I'm going to say Chairwoman Kay Hofflander in the Missouri Republican Party. because
Excellent week for them.
It's going to be a
Gene
good
Evans,
year.
I heard Lemke Day was outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to say the 2 leaders in the Missouri Senate, Senator Walsh and Senator Rowden. Anytime you have a contentious issue that ends up without a PQ, I think it's a very good week for the Senate and the state. We'll be right back with a hopefully good week for the state. We'll have Governor Nixon, I'm pretty sure, on next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.
I'm a history buff, like I know a lot of you are if you watch the show. We're doing a thing of the history of Missouri. We're going to do it one county at a time. We call it Show Me Missouri. We're going to travel to all 114 counties of the state. We'll have a member of the Farm Bureau, county elected officials, some of your state legislators you see here on the show. We're going to talk about the history, what's happening now in the county, and how the two are interconnected. It's a passion project of mine. If you like history, I hope you'll get involved. Follow us, go to MissouriTimes.com. You can see it. We'll probably branch it off into its own social media at some point. But you've been so good to us at the Missouri Times, the show, different papers. This is a passion project that I hope you'll enjoy. It's called Show Me Missouri, the history of Missouri, one county at a time. The first county was Polk County. We had a great time. And we hope you'll go to MissouriTimes.com, find a little bit about it. And if you like the history of the state, I hope you'll enjoy it.